But I just want to conclude with a small comment, just because Shabbos is coming, and this week is Shabbos Parshas Parah, right?
Yeah.
This week is Parshas Parah. And before Shabbos of Zachar, we talked a little bit about Zachar. So just a little bit about Parah. Parah, of course, literally means they have the heifer. And what we're reading about really is a description of the law of becoming ritually pure after having contracted impurity, specifically the impurity of coming in contact with a deceased person, which we all are. We've all been to funerals, so we're all impure of coming in contact with a corpse, to make mace. Now, the reason why we're reading this now is because we're about to come to Pesach. And when it comes to Pesach, everybody wants to do the Korban Pesach. Everyone wants to be part of the sacrifice of the Korban Pesach. And someone who's impure by having come in contact with a corpse may not partake of that. So in biblical times, in the lead up to Pesach, all the Jewish people from all over Israel would start to prepare for their pilgrimage to Yerushalayim. So part of the preparation was to purify themselves of their impurity of having come in contact with corpse. Throughout the rest of the year, there's no need, unless they're planning to go to the temple. But if you're at home, okay, so you're impure because you touched a dead body, just like we are. What's the problem? We can still daven, we can still do everything we have to. But now we all want to go to the temple. We all want to partake of the Korban Pesach. We all want to take part of the Pesach offering. So everybody has to go through this. I don't know everybody, but certainly a huge amount of Jews will have to go through this impurity, because a huge amount of Jews presumably would have been to funerals throughout the year. And therefore we read the Parshas Parah leading up to Pesach. Now, this reading, considering what I just described, you wouldn't say this is a biblical commandment. The biblical commandment is not to read the Parshas Parah. It's not even a biblical commandment to make yourself pure. In theory, a person can remain impure and not do the Korban Pesach. He'll be exempt from the Korban Pesach. He'll do it at the second Pesach, or he'll leave Eretz Yisrael and not even be obligated to do the second Pesach either.
But I think if you intentionally do that, it's liable for carrot, huh?
If you intentionally ignore the Korban Pesach when you're required.
Yeah.
But if you're not required for the Korban Pesach.
Yeah, but if you intentionally. No. So.
In fact, in 1967 and 68 and 69, after the IDF reconquered Jerusalem, before they gave away half of it, the Rebbe urged Jews, and his Hasidim specifically, to leave Yerushalayim on Erev Pesach. And then come back to the Seder night, but to leave the Yerushalayim on Erev Pesach. Why? Because the obligation to bring a Korban Pesach is not dependent on the temple being there. It's dependent on Jewish control of Jerusalem. And therefore, if there is Jewish control of Jerusalem, in theory, we're all obligated to go to the Temple Mount and bring a Korban Pesach. Now that opens up a can of worms to all kinds of problems, because we don't know what to do. We don't have Kohen, we don't have this, we don't have that. It becomes a huge problem. So to avoid the issue, they told people, leave Jerusalem. And the halacha is, if you're derech rechaika, if you are at a certain distance from Jerusalem, you're not obligated to the Korban Pesach. And then came Pesach Sheni, they were told them again, second Pesach, also leave, because otherwise you'd be obligated. As for the fact that they were impure, that wasn't enough. Because the law is that if the majority of Jews are impure, you do the Korban Pesach in your impurity. And today, the majority of Jews are impure. So you have to leave Jerusalem to make yourself not obligated. Yeah, it doesn't apply anymore because, unfortunately, we don't have control over all of Jerusalem anymore. But this was I never wrote about this in 68. I think it's 69 also. I'm not sure when they gave it back. And they gave back the rest of the territories. I think it was in 70. Anyway, somewhere there. I think it'll last for 1 or 2 years, maybe a third year.
So maybe in a way that was a good.
Sorry?
In that respect, that was not such a bad thing to give it away.
I don't know. I'm not going to say that.
No, I'm saying only for that limited reason, but 99 other reasons, no.
Yeah. Anyway, so just to conclude, so from all of this, you would say that the reading of the Parah is not a biblical obligation to do the reading. It's not even a biblical obligation to make yourself pure. It's if you want to go to the temple, you have to make yourself pure. But it's no obligation, thou shalt become pure and go to the temple. So certainly the reading of Parah is not an obligation. Why would it be an obligation? Biblically speaking. It's a rabbinic enactment to remember what was, that people used to become pure. It's not like, for example, a couple of weeks back when we read the story of Zachar, we read the story of Amalek, which is a biblical obligation, as we discussed. Go and remember the story of Amalek. It's an obligation. When it comes to Parah, it's not that kind of biblical obligation. At least that's not what you would think. And this is the majority view. However, there is a view, the Tosfos, famous view discussed in 1,000 commentaries and one, which says that it is a biblical obligation to read the Parshas Parah. How he derives that, why he concludes that, maybe for another time. But just to note that there is such a view that the hearing of Parshas Parah, the listening to the story, the listening to the law of the Parah that we could do on Shabbos, there is such a view that it actually is a biblical obligation. But either way, definitely the message of the Parah, the message of making ourselves pure, even when you're not obligated, as is the law of the Parah, you don't have to become impure. But Jews voluntarily wanted to become pure because they wanted to get closer and closer to Hashem, and every Jew wanted to take part of the Korban Pesach and wanted to do so in a state of purity. That message, definitely we must take to heart. Have a wonderful Shabbos evening.
Good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos, Rabbi Yeshiko. God bless you all. Take care, Yeshua. All the very best to you all. Thank you so much.